This is an abandoned North Korean fishing boat that washed ashore in Japan. In recent years, boats like this, often with dead bodies inside, have been appearing with increasing frequency on Japanese shores. They've come to be called ghost boats. To get behind the mystery of these boats, I traveled to the Sea of Japan, which is also known as the East Sea. Surrounded by Russia, Japan, and North and South Korea, these are some of the most disputed and poorly monitored waters in the world. My goal was to get a first-hand look at what might be causing hundreds of men to die at sea on these washed-up ghost boats. What I found was the largest fleet of illegal fishing boats ever documented, more than 700 of them Chinese, and all of them in violation of UN sanctions on foreign fishing in North Korean waters. But let me first take a step back and explain the ghost boats and the mystery of these dead bodies. For starters, it's important to know that this tragic and gruesome problem is growing. In 2017, the Japanese Coast Guard documented 104 of these dilapidated North Korean fishing boats washing ashore, with several dozen dead bodies. By 2018, the number of these boats nearly doubled. The little I could tell from government reports is that these North Korean men seem to have been battered by typhoons or stranded by engine failure, and eventually they were dying from starvation, hypothermia, or dehydration. To the extent that we know anything about these mysterious deaths and their ghost boats, it's much thanks to a nonprofit research group called Global Fishing Watch, which specializes in satellite technology and artificial intelligence. In 2018, Global Fishing Watch teamed up with a group of academics from South Korea and Japan to use satellite data in creative new ways, and they figured out that this huge armada of Chinese boats was fishing in North Korean waters. This discovery partly explains why the squid stock in these waters has dropped more than 70% in recent years. This rusty flotilla of industrial squidders, which makes up roughly a third of China's distant water fleet, is also likely displacing the smaller wooden North Korean boats. The presence of these industrial Chinese boats is really a big deal because in 2017, the UN Security Council unanimously signed sanctions forbidding foreign fishing in North Korean waters. This means China, which signed these sanctions, is flagrantly violating them. Meanwhile, the amount of squid that these industrial illegal boats are pulling out of the water is colossal, about 220,000 tons a year. That's more squid than Japan and South Korea fish in any given year. Documenting the presence of these illegal boats was not easy. They're relatively invisible to on-land authorities because they turn off their transponders. However, Global Fishing Watch used satellites in new ways.
As recently as about 5 years ago, we really had essentially no idea who was fishing where in the world's oceans. Many of the world's fishing vessels are required to transmit their positions, but actually that's a choice that a captain makes. So while he's required to keep it on, he can flip that thing off. And so we think of these vessels as the dark fleet. Now we have these new technologies pioneered by people like Global Fishing Watch that allow us to track a huge portion of the global fishing fleet in near real time.
This is Jae-yoon Park, a data scientist with Global Fishing Watch.
When you see the Chinese boats with this technology, night light detection, you see these are really, really bright compared to any other boats in the same region. These are the most brightest.
While most fishing boats become invisible when they turn off their transponders, many squid boats use really bright lights to fish at night. Global Fishing Watch used specialized satellites that spot lights from space, and that's how they were able to track this fleet. The theory that Park and his team of researchers developed is that this industrial illegal flotilla from China was displacing hundreds of smaller, local, wooden North Korean boats, pushing them further out to sea where the fishermen on board were getting stuck and sometimes dying. But as convincing as Global Fishing Watch's data was, I wanted to see the Chinese fleet with my own eyes. I wanted to see them illegally entering North Korean waters. So I asked Park to join me on a trip offshore in these waters where we'd buy our way onto a South Korean squid boat and head out into these conflicted waters near the North Korean sea border to witness the Chinese Armada firsthand. My hope was to spot at least one boat with its transponder turned off and heading into illegal waters. Instead, we found a fleet of 15 of them.
It's a trawler. Given the shape of the boat, I think it's a trawler.
After we spotted the boats, we took down their names and key information. But when we tried to fly a drone to get a closer look, one of the Chinese boats abruptly changed course and began driving directly at us. Understandably, the captain of our ship feared that we might get rammed by the Chinese squidders, so he peeled off and we began our long trip back to port. The aggressiveness of the Chinese boats was illustrative in its own right, since these bigger industrial boats are infamous for bullying local fishermen in smaller wooden boats if they see them as competitors or a threat. In South Korea, local authorities say the influx of Chinese boats is a serious problem, not just for the potential of violence, but also because they're a major driver in the sharp decline in the squid stock in these waters.
Yeah.
You can step up there and I'll hand stuff up too. To better understand this perspective, I went to an island called Yuling, which is a tiny spit of land, part of South Korea, located in the middle of the East Sea, not far from the North Korean sea border. The fishermen on this island depend entirely on the squid stock. I talked to the mayor of the island, and he said that when storms arrive, Chinese boats, sometimes armadas of them of more than 200 vessels at a time, show up looking for safe harbor. The port on Yuling is built for maybe 24 boats. So when these 200 industrial vessels show up, they ransack the piers, they dump oil and trash, they allow their anchors to drag up shallow pipes. The mayor said that no Western reporters have ever visited his island, and he emphasized that the world needs to know what's happening here. As I left Yuling Island and then South Korea, I was struck that while there is true optimism in what Global Fishing Watch accomplished in revealing this illegal fleet, there's also a reminder in this story of the extent of lawlessness at sea. Yes, in the era of drones, big data, and satellites, there are clever new ways to police the oceans. But there's also flagrant violations of the rules, in this case, on a scale never before seen. And the dead bodies and disappearing squid stocks we see on the East Sea are just further proof that laws are only as good as their enforcement.